Emmanuel's childhood conception of God was not very personal. It certainly was not the orthodox image of a being outside himself with a long beard and a halo. Emmanuel was not aware of any very clear distinction between heaven, hell, and home. All seemed to be here, and when I was in hell, God was there too. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, as a poem goes. When Emmanuel quickened in response to these verses, the quickening came less from thought than from sentiments and feelings. Emmanuel seemed more aware of the aspect of immanence than of transcendence, of being rather than of becoming. And he did not so much walk with God as in God, especially in his rich and ample solitude. What was most tiresome, blurring, dulling, and draining during his childhood were the noisy, assertive, and aggressive folks trying to share their ideals and their prejudices. Although Emmanuel did not take eagerly to what was called education and civilization, his consciousness had become colored by ego, and when he was 8 years old, he gradually succumbed to a sin complex. Secretly and unbeknownst to any human but himself, Emmanuel heaved a large stone, which had been lying quietly by the roadside, on its end, so that it stood erect like a lingam. To him, it became quite a landmark. There it stood silently for true remembrance, a notion probably remembered from reading Israel's dream of an open heaven, angels ascending and descending on ladders, and of a battle with God, and a stone of remembrance erected on the spot. The sight of the stone was to remind him of the more real mode of awareness, the essential world of living values and harmonious relationships, which was at the time in grave danger of being lost sight of in the frothy and choppy waves of usurping ego consciousness. Ego memories threaten to blot out the true memory, the living awareness, the natural prenatal light full of harmony and wholeness and unity. And the uplifted countenance of the good stone was to remind him, "You stupid and giddy boy, how can you forget yourself like that? Remember, remember, and you will not laugh at such silly tricks and these merely clever antics. You'll not wallow in desires nor fall for mean temptations. Remember, recollect yourself." It was not so much a big don't from myself to me as a call to remembrance of true memory beyond thoughts, where there are no oughts, no conflicting desires, no divided consciousness, and no dis-ease of trying. In this unitive mode of experiencing, the idea of sin is seen to be rooted in the ignorance of our true nature. In its unitive light, we are livingly aware that one will is ever done on earth as in heaven. We lose the conceit of agency and know livingly that unbroken perfectum est, So why pray in words? Why fuss in ego-willful doings? The stone of remembrance did not shout loudly enough. True memory became more intermittent in consciousness, and the Viking boy duly fell into the grip of desires. The clear vision and the calm grace were blurred in the play of ego consciousness, but not entirely. Even then, there were still those very rare moments where the combination of solitude and silence would reawaken the song of myself. In the lucid moments of ego forgetfulness, even grown-up children may well make the winged journey from a divided to an integral consciousness, from the outer multi-universe to the inward universe. It is an effortless journey in the second as it is the first innocence, in the pre-mental as in the mature, childlike state of awareness beyond both emotional waves and mental usurpation. The journey's speed is not a matter of merit, of ideals, of trying, nor of willing. Fatal both to arrival and to entrance are power complexes, Shakti antics, in all the ways of ego consciousness. Sunyata used Shakti antics for someone pretending to be spiritual with their efforts of ego. But children may consciously or unconsciously harmonize their environment by making circumstances, and especially inner stances, right and conducive for the necessary change to happen beautifully. Our blinkers dissolve and we are livingly free amidst the clarity of being. Yet Emmanuel did not experience anything happening suddenly. Grace arrived in the fullness of time. The first and the second innocence appeared to be similar, yet their immediate background was different. When we are able to accept and livingly adopt our sufferings, there is something added. So something was added in the second innocence. It was as if the memories of a recently performed shadow play, though faded in details, made us more aware of the light on the screen of silence. Because of contrast, there was a richer acceptance, a more conscious awareness. The first innocence was simply simple. It was pure because of the long preceding purgation and forgetting of impurities. In the second innocence, the consciousness was pure in contrast to recent shadows and impurities whose essence still lingered nearby. As there is always compensation in every trial and ill, so also everything has its shadows, rightly, duly, and perfectly so. We also learn to love the shadows and to accept them livingly as a due part of unbroken perfection. No person who has ever died the mystic death into life is afraid to die out of his body. Such a fearless soul can joyfully play in both words and shadows, and yet remain aware of the living silence. When children take up a conch or a large seashell and listen to the sound within, they often have a queer, fascinating, and half-frightening sense of true memory. A Himalayan silence is ever singing in the mystic Sunyata cave within each psyche. Its song is true memory, the recollection of the pristine awareness of the self. We hear it not in the mere absence of sound, but in the stilling of both desires and efforting, in the cessation of ego consciousness. With the advent of ego consciousness, and in the flux of surface values, children forget. Ego memories, desires, and willfulness blur and hide our conscious remembrance of this pure awareness of unitive self and of our psychic wholeness. But some grown-up children vaguely remember. Intuition emerges, develops, and if practiced and trained, gradually grows too clear to ever again be blurred by the deceptions and disguises of false values. These are seen through, and the soul is no longer confused by them. Once intuition is no longer permitted to atrophy unused, ignored, and discredited, it becomes a serviceable, trustworthy tool.